Hey guys, welcome to Module 4 again. This video is going to present about kind of some advanced CSS, some further CSS. And so in Module 3 we talked a little bit about cascading style sheets and what they are and how to write them and some of the really basic things you can do with it, like style text and all of that. And so what we're going to do in this module is really introduce something that's key to web design. It's called the box model. And so CSS works on this model called the box model. And typically, if you look at a website like this screen capture of the Apple website, it is a series of boxes, right? And these boxes kind of stack from top to bottom, and they stack from left to right. And so each of these boxes is placed in relative space within the browser by CSS, and they are placed within relative space from one another by CSS. So the width, color, and height of this box is CSS. The space between the top and the space between the left and the right of the margin on here, so the edge of the browser, that is all CSS. The space between these two boxes, that's also CSS. So you can kind of get the point. They can be stacked, they can be nested within each other. So probably each one of these little images has its own little box that it's a part of, right? And they work together inside of this larger box. They can float around, so sometimes you'll have stuff floated all the way to the left and something floated all the way to the right. So the box model is really, really powerful. It is also probably the single most frustrating thing about modern web design. So if you get to this step, and up till now you have had minor issues, and you get to this step and it just kind of blows up on you, that's okay. You're not alone. We're going to work through this together. So a typical web page from a browser point of view might look something like this. So it's got a big container around it. It's got a header image, it's got a navigation, it's got a footer, and a section or an article, right? So the code for that in HTML might look something like this. Lost my mouse. So it might look something like this. That's relatively normal. It's got a container, like I said, it's got a header, nav, article, and a footer. Okay. The CSS for this might look something like this, where you said, okay, each of these classes is going to have some kind of call on it. Okay, and so the nav is going to have a property and a value, the article is going to have a property and value, and the footer is going to have a property and a value. Same as the container up here, this hashtag container, it's also going to have a value, okay? Alright, so some common things that you can style within the box. You can style the background color, the width, the padding, the margin, the border width, border color, and border style. So you can do a lot with borders. I don't particularly love borders, but we're going to talk a little bit about why they might be useful. And we're going to talk through each one of these different properties individually and talk through what you can really do with them and that kind of stuff. So, all right, so if we were to think through this image that's on the left in terms of the CSS there on the right, the content box, so that middle box right there, it is going to likely be some kind of background color like this hashtag CCC, which is kind of a mid-gray color. And then you're going to have a margin at the bottom that is keeping it away from the box, the footer box. And then you're also going to have a border around it, and that border is 1 pixel wide, okay, in width. It is dashed and it is blue. Okay, so you've assigned all of those properties to the border. And then you're assigning an overall color and that color is relative to the actual color of the text right here, okay? And then you're saying width is auto, and what width auto basically means is that it's going to go to whatever the width of everything else is. So, okay, let's go back and talk a little bit about divs. So we introduced them last time, but let's reiterate what they actually do. A div tag is nothing more than a container unit. So it is a division within your page. You can have as many divs as you want, right? So every image on your entire gallery page can be a separate div if that's how you want to organize it. That's totally fine. Divs can be nested within each other. So each image within that gallery might be a separate div tag, and all, let's say 15 of those are grouped within another div tag that you're calling gallery, right? So you can group them together. You can use CSS in relation to divs to apply fonts, to make things certain sizes, to make things space out, to use white space to your advantage. And the way that you're going to do that is with these common tags. So width, height, float, clear, border, padding, and margin. Okay, so this is a basic representation of the box model. I would suggest that you know this by heart, because on the HTML test that is coming up, this will be a question, I can guarantee you, and you will have to fill these in, okay? So let's talk through each of these kind of individually. Let's start with width and height. Width and height define, obviously, the width and the height of an element. So you could make a box that is 50 pixels wide and 50 pixels tall, right? You can also declare these in terms of different kind of sizing elements. So one of those is obviously pixels. One of them is what's called EM. And for the sake of this class, we're not really going to use EM a lot, but EM is really helpful if you're trying to get fonts that look right together. And then the third one that's really important for this class is percentages. Percentage widths are what is going to allow you to create responsive designs that look just as good on a phone as they do on a laptop or an iPad. So for the sake of this module, we are going to create a really basic design using these pixel widths. And then in module 5, you're going to basically take that pixel width design and you're going to convert it using a little bit of math and a lot of cheat sheets from me. You're going to convert it into percentages, okay? So that's width and height. It's really, really simple. You can make a box however big or however small you want. Okay, float. If you think of CSS in terms of a lava lamp, okay, stuff is going to move around within the lava lamp, right? And some things are going to bubble up this way, and some things are going to bubble up that way. Float is a way of forcing the boxes that you have set a width and a height for already. It's going to force them to go in a certain direction. So it can make it basically go all the way to the left or go all the way to the right. Now, a short note here. There is not a float center. Okay, a lot of people try to do that when they're first starting out in web design. There is no such thing as a float center. There is a way to center things, and we're going to talk about that later. So for now, though, just know that if we were going to try and draw this box right here, we would say float left, and that's going to knock it all the way to the left. And then we said margin right 10 pixels, and that would keep anything that tries to come over here 10 pixels away from it, okay? The next thing we're going to talk about is the clear function. When elements are floated around, they kind of move together in what's called a caravan, or the lava lamp idea. The clear property basically takes whatever box, in this case box 3, you've assigned a clear both to it, a clear colon both, and then put a semicolon. When you do that, it detaches it from the caravan and it forces it down to start on a new line. This is really helpful if you have a whole bunch of boxes that are all in a row, so you have 3 boxes, and then you want another box to end up down here. You could use the clear function to break up that caravan. Okay, so that's clear. Border, like I said earlier, I don't love borders, but they do have a good purpose sometimes. So you can define a border to be all around. So you could just say border, like in this case where I just said border red dotted 1 pixel. Or you could say just give me the top, or just give me the right, or the bottom, or just the left. That's helpful sometimes if you just want to put like a dashed line across your page in between 2 blocks of text to break them up. I do that sometimes. That's pretty much the only time I really use borders is for that specific function. And so in that case, you could declare, it this way. You could say the top, the bottom, the left, the right. You could make each one of these a different color. You could make some of them solid, some of them dotted, some of them dashed. You could make some of them bigger and some of them smaller. Or you could just call it this way as well. So there's a lot of different ways to do it. Basically, what you're doing when you say this, the red dotted 1px, is you're saying here's the color, here's the style, and here's the width. Okay. Here you've just listed it out individually. It's kind of the same idea. Okay, so padding. Padding is the space between the edge of the box, not the edge of the browser, but the edge of the box that you have drawn using height and width, right? The edge of the box and where your content is going to start. So where the text is going to start being written. So in this case, we have a box that is this large. It's this big gray box, right? And if I put a p tag in this div and started writing, it would start right here. Okay, and that is because I said padding 10 pixels. And whenever you say this, that gives you a padding of 10 pixels all the way around. Top, bottom, left, right, everywhere. If you say this, it works clockwise. Okay, so it goes around. So you could say 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, or however many tens that is, and you're going to have 10 pixels on every side. You could say 10, 5, 10, 10, you're going to have 10, 5, 10, 10. Okay, or I use this a lot where I'll just individually declare what I want. So I might want it to be padding left a certain amount, I might want padding top a certain amount, and I don't necessarily care about padding bottom or padding right, whatever. Okay, that leads us to margin. So if padding is the space between the edge of the box and where the text actually starts, margin is the space between the edge of the box and the edge of the browser or the edge of the nearest element, so the nearest div tag. So in this case, you could say margin is 10 pixels and it's going to start the box 10 pixels from the edge. This is really important on your top divs, so maybe your header tag and stuff like that, because you want it to space down a little bit from the edge of the browser. Okay, and this is also how you're going to place elements where you can have a box right here and a box right here and maybe a box down here, and they're not just going to totally overlap on one another. Okay, so that's margin. There are some text properties that you can use. The most important ones to me are written out here. I'm not going to go through each of these, but you can play with these on your own this week and then in this module over the next couple weeks and kind of figure out what each of them do. I use text transform a lot to where it just makes everything uppercase. That's really nice for headings. You can text align, you can put in letter spacing, which is basically kind of like kerning. You can make things red or change the color to whatever color you want. You can change the font, you can make it italics. All of that can happen, and it happens very easily. Just like in this case, I just made a class called a main heading, and then here it is written out in the browser, and here it is written out in the CSS. So here's HTML, here's CSS, and here's what it's going to look like. Okay, some notes about using colors. So up till now, I've been relatively careful to only use like the named colors like red, blue, green, and then if I was going to use another color, it was the hashtag and then 3 letters or 3 numbers. That is very purposeful. There's kind of 2 ways to do colors in CSS. There's standard, which these are the standard colors. Don't ask me why fuchsia and aqua and lime made it on this list, but red is also on this list and a couple others. But these are really the ones that you can use just by calling the name, right? You can just say blue and it goes and gets a blue. There's another way you can use it called hexadecimal. And hexadecimal is where you say a hashtag and then usually you say 6 or 7 or 3 combinations of letters and numbers. Hex numbers and hex codes for colors is probably what you found for your color scheme that you already put together. Okay, we've mentioned a little bit about how links can look different if you style them. Well, this is how you would do that. You could make a link red by calling it color red. And if you didn't want it to be underlined, you could say text decoration, none. You could say, a border at the bottom. You could set it to be that. You could set the background to be white, whatever you want. If you set the background to be white and you set this border, it's going to end up looking like a button, which is exactly how we're going to build a navigation bar here soon. So really, really basic stuff. All of this is available from W3 Schools. You can find an entire list of every thing that you can do to an A tag to style it differently. You can do it to where if you hover over it, it changes colors. You can make it to where if you've if it's the page you're on, if you visited it, all of that. So one of the things that you can do with CSS that I'm going to caution you to be very careful with is that you can set background images, and you can set that background image to repeat and basically look tiled. If you want your website to look like a really, really awesome 2008 MySpace page, do this. If you want your website to look like a website built by someone that actually cares, don't do this. Okay, but sometimes you want a background image in a div or whatever, and so you might want to use background image, repeat, position, attachment. Okay, so you can actually layer these on top of each other. You can use background and color and image and all of that to kind of create some 3D space as you go, from all the way at the edge of the browser in if you wanted to do that. I don't typically do that, but it's something you can do. A little bit more about background image. It is the property that actually sets an image. So you can call a URL for, in this case, flower.jpg, and it will make that the background of your web page. And that's fine if that's how you want to do it. I don't love doing it, but if you want to do it, that's fine. You can use background repeat to make an image repeat over and over and over. You can make it repeat horizontally or vertically, or you can say, hey, don't repeat it at all. If you say repeat, it's just going to tile across the entire thing. You can also set the positioning to where it can be to the left, to the bottom, to the top, to the center, to the right, all of those. And you can also make it to where you can set it to where it can actually scroll. So if your image is too big, you could set the whole setting right here, this background attachment, to scroll, so that as you go down, the image reveals more and more of itself. That's not necessarily helpful in all cases, but there are a couple cases where I've used that, where I needed to be able to scroll through an image without it actually taking up space on the page. Okay, so that's pretty much CSS in a nutshell. This is a really, really complicated thing. So if you have to watch this video a couple times to get it, or if you need to come by my office hours, or if you need to have a Skype or a FaceTime office hour with me, that's great. Let's make sure that we communicate during this module, because if you don't get on top and really grasp this concept now, the next couple modules are going to be really, really difficult for you. So some extra resources if you're looking for them. W3 Schools, this top link is all the CSS properties that are out there. They're all there. The second one is everything about CSS. So if you want to just know more generally about CSS, or if you want to work through some of their examples, you can go there and do that. There's some other links on here that I'm not going to talk through, but they're all really great. If you're looking for a book, if you've kind of found that you enjoy web design and you want to know more about cascading style sheets, this one by McFarland is really good in my opinion. So that's it for this time, and I'll see you next time.